Hello, and thank you for your interest in the Spotlight on Humanities in Higher Education grant program offered by the National Endowment for the Humanities. I'm Rebecca Boggs, a program officer in the Division of Education Programs and part of the leadership team for the Spotlight program. This webinar is recorded and will roughly follow the program page where you clicked the link to start this video, and especially the notice of funding opportunity, which we'll get to in a minute. Joining me today is my colleague P.C. Fleming, another program officer in our division on the Spotlight team.
Thanks, Rebecca. If you have additional questions after this webinar, please join us for a live Q&A session at 1 p.m. Eastern Time on September 14th. The link is posted in the Notice of Funding Opportunity and on the program page just below this video. You can reach out to us at any time through the program's email address, spotlight@neh.gov. There's a real person monitoring that email address, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. The draft deadline is September 28th. We can't read drafts after that date, but if you send it to us before then, we're happy to speak with you about it. I know that deadline's coming up very soon, but keep in mind that you can send us whatever you have. Maybe it's a full draft, or maybe it's just a 2-sentence idea. Whatever it is, we're happy to speak with you. Hearing ideas at a preliminary stage is one of the most exciting parts of our job. And even after the draft deadline, you can reach out to us with general questions about the program. So that's a quick overview of the dates, and now back to Rebecca to hear more about the program.
Before you begin your application, you'll want to know more about the grant program and about what the application requires. That's what we'll cover today. We will follow the steps on the program page, and most of our time will be spent on step 1, which you'll see just below this video. Before we get to that first step, though, you'll see a basic summary of the grant program. As will all NEH grant programs, your proposal should present a project that meets the requirements of the particular grant program. On the left side of the program page, just below the name of the grant, is a description of what this grant program aims to do. In general, the Spotlight program supports the exploration and development of small projects that would benefit underserved populations through the teaching and study of the humanities at small to medium-sized institutions of higher education. 2 goals set this grant apart from other NEH awards. First, we designed this grant with the goal of supporting institutions and faculty who haven't received much support from the NEH in the past. We recognize that the application process is a daunting one, and we've done our best to streamline things for this program. Second, the Spotlight program can support small projects. Your project should benefit the institution rather than merely your own individual research or teaching agenda, but you can work on a small scale with focus, even revising a single course or professional development for a small group of faculty. The Spotlight program is open to accredited 2- and 4-year colleges and universities, and also to nonprofit organizations whose work advances the humanities at these institutions and among their faculty and students. So if you're part of an organization that supports the teaching and learning of the humanities at colleges and universities, we can help. If you're the project director heading the project, make sure that you're affiliated with and submitting it through an eligible institution of higher education or nonprofit organization. You cannot apply for this grant as an individual. The institution is the applicant, not you. Foreign and for-profit entities are ineligible to apply. If your institution is eligible, you might also consider whether Spotlight is your best choice for seeking NEH support. During the review process, peer reviewers and NEH staff will take into account the size of the institution and the types of students you serve. This program's review criteria include showing that the academic institution is small or medium size and demonstrating a commitment to benefiting underserved populations. So if your institution is a large university or one that has little focus on meeting the needs of underserved students, this might not be the right grant for you. But if you teach at a minority-serving institution or a school in a rural area, or a college whose students are mostly first-generation or non-traditional students, or if you work in an organization supporting these institutions, a Spotlight grant can provide funding to help you and your colleagues move forward, giving you time to pursue those ideas that maybe you've had for a while but haven't had a chance to work on. If Spotlight doesn't sound right to you, email us at education@neh.gov, and we'd be happy to help you find a grant that's the right fit. But if Spotlight sounds like a good choice, the rest of this video will help you get started on your application. On the right-hand side of the program page, you'll find the grant snapshot. As you can see, this program includes 2 funding levels. Exploration projects are up to $25,000 and the grant lasts up to 1 year. Development projects are up to $60,000 for up to 2 years. I'll say more about these 2 funding levels in just a moment. Under the grant snapshot, you'll also see the deadline. This year, applications are due November 2nd. And as PC mentioned, the draft deadline is September 28th. It's not required to send us a draft, but many applicants find it useful to do so. So that's the basic idea. The grant is designed to support humanities teachers, and you can choose between the 2 levels, exploration and development. We'll now turn to step 1, which on the program page is just below this video. The most important document for you to consider is the Notice of Funding Opportunity, which we call the NOFO, or sometimes the Program Guidelines. Most of the rest of this webinar will focus on the NOFO. If you'd like to follow along, you can download the PDF on the program page at the link circled here. This webinar should not be a replacement for the NOFO, and we won't cover every single detail, but we can give an overview and we'll help you navigate the document to find what you need. The NOFO begins with an executive summary, which will include the information we just went over, including the purpose of the grant, the 2 levels, the deadlines, and the allowable project start dates. Below the executive summary, you'll find the table of contents. The first 3 sections tell you about the program. The 4th section tells you what you need to apply, including a table of items to make sure you've included everything you need for a complete application. And the 5th section tells you how your proposal will be reviewed. The NOFO's first section describes the purpose of the grant. This section repeats some of the language on the program page, and I'd like to expand a bit on the kinds of projects the Spotlight program supports, and particularly to highlight 3 key phrases. First is that this is a grant from the Division of Education Programs at the National Endowment for the Humanities, and so your project must be centered on the teaching and study of the humanities. On the slide is a quotation from the NEH's founding legislation, which is also available on our website. It provides a definition of the humanities, listing what we generally consider humanities disciplines, including, but not limited to, modern languages and humanistic social sciences like anthropology and sociology. The definition also mentions our diverse heritage, traditions, and history. It's up to you in your application to explain how your project relates to the humanities as understood by the NEH. Second is that this project can support small projects. Some of our other grants primarily support major curricular revisions, like a new minor or changes to a general education program. This grant aims to support smaller projects, which might be accomplished by just a few people within a year or 2. You might create or revise a course or set of courses, or develop new teaching materials, support student research or experiential learning projects. You might organize a shared reading program or opportunities for faculty development. Think about what would most impact your campus. But you don't have to keep within the limits of the campus. You may want to partner with organizations or groups in your community, or engage in workforce preparation that aligns your humanities teaching with students' career or professional goals. And lastly, projects should benefit underserved communities. Again, it's up to you to identify the groups that your project would impact. Once you've determined that your project is a good fit for Spotlight, your next decision is whether to apply at the exploration or development level. Which one you choose depends on the scope of the project, including how long you think it would take and how many people are involved. Exploration projects are up to $25,000 and have a period of performance of up to 1 year. They support administrators, faculty, community members, and humanities nonprofit organizations in planning for a project that would significantly strengthen the teaching of the humanities at colleges or universities, whereas development projects are up to $60,000 and have a period of performance up to 2 years. They support divisions, departments, programs, and humanities nonprofit organizations in advancing a single, well-defined project or one stage of a larger project. Neither level requires any prior work on the project, and you don't have to have had an exploration grant to apply for a development grant. And neither level requires a particular or final outcome. A grant at either level could complete a small manageable project or get started on something that might take a little longer. If you're unsure which level is best for you, please get in touch with us. We're happy to talk it through with you. Since this is our first round, we don't have any examples of previously funded projects. you can see a list of potential projects on pages 2 to 3 of the NOFO. Here are a few ideas we came up with, but the sky's the limit for what you can put together to serve your community's needs. Can we just go back one, PC? Sorry. Thanks. In an exploration level award, here's an example. We thought that a small community college with a significant Hispanic and non-traditional student population could bring together business and community leaders to identify ways to connect the college's humanities classes to the community's needs. Grant outcomes for this project could include plans for the students to study the history of the oldest buildings in town and conferences on the cultural and religious heritage of new immigrant populations. One idea for a development project would be for a nonprofit educational organization that could use a development level award to hold a 3-day workshop addressing the needs of humanities teachers at Indigenous serving institutions. In this 3-day workshop, they'd bring together faculty from several different tribal colleges and universities, plus one community college and one small public college, both of which have significant Indigenous student populations. From this work, the organization would make plans for collaborative public presentations about Native traditions and cultures, and for integrating community outreach assignments into humanities courses at 3 of the institutions. Another development grant that we give as a sample idea would be for a small rural regional college to create an open access reader of primary documents for state history classes that could be used on the college's campus and on high schools across the state, and in high schools across the state. Faculty would draw on archives in the state capitol and in campus libraries. The grant funds would support faculty time on the project, image acquisition for the reader, and a technology platform to host the finished product. So, when you've decided which level you want to apply for, then you can start creating the separate parts of your application. I'll turn things over to my colleague PC to explain a bit more about them.
Thanks, Rebecca. We were on page 3 of the NOFO. The next few pages provide details about eligibility and other requirements. I'd like to pick us up again on page 8, where you'll see a table listing the required parts of the application. When reviewers see your proposal, they see it as a single PDF. But when you upload it, you'll do so in separate parts. Make sure to save these components as PDF files before you upload them. I'll explain these parts individually, but you should remember that they will all work together. Think of your proposal as a unified argument for why your project deserves to be funded by the NEH. You won't be in the room to explain yourself, so make sure your proposal makes the strongest case. Be strategic, be explicit, and be clear. Attachments 2 through 4 are somewhat self-explanatory. The work plan is your schedule for the grant period. You'll provide bios or resumes for personnel involved in the grant, and you'll include a letter of support from your institution or organization. Attachments 5 through 7 relate to your institution's relationship with the federal government and are required in certain cases. If you have a grants office or an office of sponsored research, they can help you with these parts. And if you need help, you can always reach out to us. We'll assist you. Attachment 1, though, deserves some extra attention. This is the project narrative, which is the most important part of your application. After a cover page, this is the first thing that reviewers will see, and you should consider it your primary focus. The narrative must be 5 pages or fewer. It's okay to single space it, but you cannot go onto a 6th page. Applications that go over the limit are removed from the pool as ineligible, and so no matter how good your proposal is, we won't get a chance to see it. The narrative must also include the headings listed here. I'll go over each of them in a moment, but before I do that, I want to talk about the review criteria. These are listed on pages 26 and 27 of the NOFO, and we recommend that you pay close attention to these, since this is how peer reviewers and others at the NEH are asked to think about your proposal. The review criteria are grouped into 4 main headers: intellectual quality, design quality, institutional context, and potential benefit. Intellectual quality comes first, because if your project isn't worth doing in terms of its intellectual significance, then it won't matter how organized you are or how many students it might affect. But if you do have a great intellectual focus for your project, you also have to combine it with a feasible design that can get the job done to benefit the humanities at your institution. The third criterion, institutional context, describes how reviewers will consider the match between your institution and this particular grant program. Make sure your narrative explains why your institution qualifies as small or medium-sized and how it benefits underserved communities or students. Finally, we want to know how your project will make a difference. Show us what its benefit will be for students, faculty, the institution or organization, or the community, and how it will improve humanities teaching and learning. In general, look at what's written in these review criteria and be sure that an intelligent reader will have strong, positive answers to how well your proposal addresses each of them. Ideally, they'll be won over by the time they finish reading your narrative, and then their positive assessment will be strengthened by the other attachments that follow it. On page 9 of the NOFO, you'll find this chart, which links each of the required sections of the narrative to the review criteria. The chart can be helpful as you write the narrative so that you make sure each section covers what it needs to. And I'll now turn to those sections. You can find a complete description of each one in the NOFO. As a reminder, limit your narrative to 5 pages, and we recommend single spacing. The whole narrative should be written so that a generalist audience could understand it, and you should carefully address or answer each of the items in each section header: humanities content and activities, project personnel, institutional context, and benefit. I won't go over each section in too much detail, but I'll encourage you to read carefully the descriptions in the NOFO. These are probably the most important pages, since they tell the reviewers what to expect. And there's one more part of your application I want to mention briefly, and that's the research and related budget form. You'll find this in your grants.gov workspace when applying. The page looks something like this screenshot. This form will automatically integrate into your application based on what you enter there. Because it's a government-wide form, be sure to read the guidelines about how exactly to fill it out. They're on pages 6 to 25 of the NOFO. I know there's a lot of detail there, but don't let it overwhelm you. Many applicants find it helpful to work with their grants office for guidance. All projects are also required to submit a budget justification to complement the budget form itself. It gets attached as part of the budget form, actually. So be sure to title this file correctly and save it as a PDF to ensure that it integrates into the application file that your reviewers will see. The budget justification will be, in your own words, explaining what the budget is. And finally, there are a few things that this grant is prohibited from funding. You can find a complete list of funding restrictions on page 25 of the NOFO, but I want to caution you against some of the most common pitfalls we see. We cannot fund the promotion of particular religious, political, or ideological points of view, advocacy for a particular program of social action, or support for specific public policies or legislation. We also cannot fund projects whose main focus falls outside the humanities. We most often see this with projects focused on the creative arts. If your project is about creating art in any form, you may want to look to the NEA rather than the NEH. And finally, we don't fund work on educational methods or standardized testing. We do, of course, fund work about teaching in the humanities. That's the main goal, but not about general methods or testing. If you're unsure whether your project runs into any of these restrictions, please reach out to us. We're happy to help. So now you know what to do to get started on your application, and here's a timeline for when to do it. I hope you can join us for a live Q&A on September 14th at 1 p.m. Eastern. You'll find a link to join the meeting on the program page. You can send us a draft anytime before September 28th. Send it to us as an attachment. It can be a full draft or just a paragraph, whatever you would like us to provide feedback on. Final applications are due at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time on November 2nd, and we recommend submitting them before then if you can. You'll submit them through grants.gov. And speaking of grants.gov, the very first thing you should do after watching this video is ensure that you have 2 important things: an active unique entity identifier and current registrations and passwords for login.gov. You'll find an explanation and a link to check this on pages 23 and 24 of the NOFO. Registration in the System for Award Management, or SAM, can take up to a month to complete, so check on this straight away, especially if you're a first-time applicant or if your institution hasn't applied for federal funding recently. The NEH cannot grant deadline extensions for delayed registration. Your institutional grant administrator or other grant management or sponsored program staff at your institution are great contacts for guidance if you're not sure where to find this information or who to contact for access. And if they can't help you, contact the Federal Service Desk and/or grants.gov directly using the contact information on page 33 of the NOFO. Once you're in grants.gov, be sure to select the appropriate package for the level that you intend to apply for, so your application is evaluated appropriately. That is, be sure to select the ASA prefix for exploration and the ASB prefix for development. They're listed alphabetically, so you'll notice that the development link is above the exploration link. Selecting the wrong one can be a very common error, so be sure to double check that you've got the correct package. And don't let these last two slides make you nervous. Since this is an institutional award, it's quite common that the person who writes the grant isn't the one who uploads it to grants.gov. As I mentioned, your grants office can help with this step. And now that we've covered some of these technical details, I'll turn things back to Rebecca.
Thanks, PC, and thank you very much for watching this video. We hope it provided some insight into the Spotlight Grant Program. If you have further questions, please consult the FAQs, which you'll find on the program page. It's just below the other application resources. I hope you'll also join us September 14th for a live Q&A session about the program at 1 p.m. Eastern. You can also email questions to us either at the program address spotlight@neh.gov or directly at our own inboxes, which you'll see here. And don't forget, as with most NEH grants, you can send us a draft in advance. This year's draft deadline is September 28th. Thanks again, and we look forward to hearing from you.